3 days ago, my son broke my finger because I said no. No, I would not sign the loan for his wife's dream house. He grabbed my hand so hard I heard the bone snap. Then he looked at me like I was nothing, like I was just some old woman standing in his way. That moment changed everything. The pain was real, but the betrayal, that was worse. I kept quiet, not because I was weak, but because I wanted to see how far he'd go. He thought I would beg, that I'd give in. He thought fear would make me obedient. But that night, while he was celebrating his little victory, I was sitting at my kitchen table, planning how to destroy his plan. The next morning, when we went to the bank, he still believed he was in control. He didn't know I'd already turned the game around. He didn't know that one click, one screen, was about to end everything he thought he had over me. It happened on a Tuesday night. It was late, almost midnight, and the rain outside had been falling since the afternoon. The house felt smaller that night, the kind of small that comes from silence and tension. I was sitting in the living room, wearing my old gray sweater, a cup of tea on the table in front of me. The TV was on, but I wasn't really watching. I was tired, ready to go to bed. Then the front door opened. Nathan didn't knock. He never does anymore. He came in soaked from the rain, his jacket dripping water on the floor. He was holding a folder, the same one he had shown me 2 days ago. "Mom, we need to talk," he said. His voice was flat but sharp, like he was forcing himself to sound calm. I looked up. I already knew what this was about. That folder, the loan, the house he and Sienna wanted so badly. $250,000. A big, beautiful place in one of those new developments outside the city. I had told him no the first time. I told him no the second time. And tonight I was ready to tell him no again. He didn't sit down. He stood there pacing near the window, looking at the folder like it held his whole future. "Mom, I need you to co-sign. The bank said if you do it, everything goes through this week. If not, we lose the house. Sienna's already picked out the furniture. We've been working so hard." I cut him off. "Nathan, I told you. I can't sign anything. I won't." He stopped walking. He turned toward me slowly. His eyes looked darker than usual. He wasn't angry yet, not fully. He was trying to control himself. "You won't or you can't?" "I won't," I said again. The way he looked at me then, it wasn't how a son looks at his mother. It was the look of someone who had run out of patience. Someone who saw me as a problem, not a person. He took a deep breath and said, "If you don't sign, you'll regret it." For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. The only sound was the ticking clock and the rain against the window. Then I said, "Good. You just taught me the last lesson about family." His face changed. He stepped closer. He was shaking his head, muttering something I couldn't catch. And then suddenly he was right in front of me. I could smell the rain on his clothes, the sweat on his skin. He reached out, grabbed my right hand, and pulled me toward the coffee table. I tried to pull back. I told him to stop. But his grip got stronger. His fingers dug into mine. There was a sound. Small but sharp. A snap. It didn't even register at first. Just pressure and then pain that came rushing in like fire under the skin. My finger bent in a way it shouldn't. He let go. I stumbled back into the chair, holding my hand. I looked down. My right index finger was swelling fast, already turning purple. I knew it was broken. For a long second, we just stared at each other. He didn't apologize. He didn't even look shocked. He looked tired, frustrated, like this was somehow my fault. "Sign it," he said quietly, almost whispering. "Just sign it, Mom. Don't make this worse." I looked at him, and I felt something inside me go still. There was pain, yes, but underneath it there was something colder. Understanding. "No," I said. His jaw tightened. He looked like he wanted to yell, but instead he turned, grabbed the folder off the table, and stormed out. The door slammed so hard the picture frames rattled on the wall. When he was gone, the silence hit hard. I sat there for a long time, still holding my hand. The pain throbbed with every heartbeat. I could hear the rain outside, the old clock ticking on the wall, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. People think betrayal feels dramatic. It doesn't. It's quiet. It's a kind of silence that fills every corner of the room. I took a deep breath and tried to calm myself. Then I got up slowly and walked to the kitchen. I turned on the kettle, waited for the water to boil, and poured myself a cup of tea. I held it with my left hand, since my right one was useless now. I sat back down and stared at the chair where Nathan had been standing. I could still see him there, angry, desperate, not as a stranger, but not as my son either. When my husband died 5 years ago, I thought I understood what loss was. We built this house together. Every wall, every piece of furniture, every small repair had his touch on it. When he passed, I thought I'd already lost everything. But I was wrong. You can lose more. You can lose your child while he's still alive. After he died, I learned to live quietly. I wore simple clothes. I drove an old car. I let people think I was poor. It made things easier. People don't ask questions when they think you're struggling. They feel sorry for you and move on. For years, I played that part. The quiet widow, living off her pension, always grateful for small favors. I kept my real life to myself. The savings, the investments, the property, no one needed to know. Not even my children. Nathan never questioned it. He believed what he wanted to believe. That I was weak. That I needed him. That I would always give in. Tonight proved him wrong. I looked down at my hand again. The finger was swollen and stiff. It would take a while to heal. That was fine. I had time. Time to think, time to plan, time to decide what kind of mother I was going to be from now on. I took another sip of tea. It had gone cold, but I didn't care. For a long moment I sat there listening to the rain. Then I smiled, not because I found it funny, but because something inside me had shifted. Nathan thought he broke me, but what he really did was wake me up. I looked at the window, saw the reflection of a tired old woman, gray hair messy, eyes swollen from crying earlier that day. She didn't look like someone who could fight back. And that's exactly what everyone had always thought. That's what would make it easy. I whispered to myself, now it's my turn to play. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth, but they felt right. They felt steady. I said them again, softer this time, just to make sure I meant them. I stood up and turned off the light. The rain kept falling outside, steady and cold. Somewhere in the distance, a car door slammed. Maybe Nathan's, maybe not. It didn't matter. The moment had already changed everything. In that small, quiet house with one broken finger and 1,000 thoughts running through my head, I knew exactly what I was going to do next. He thought I was weak. He thought I had no power left. He was wrong. The next morning, I woke up with my hand still swollen. It hurt when I moved it, so I wrapped it in a small towel and told myself it would heal on its own. I didn't want to go to the hospital. I didn't want questions. The rain had stopped, but the sky stayed gray. The whole house looked dull and tired, just like me. That's how I liked it. Nothing shiny, nothing new, the kind of place people look at and forget. My car in the driveway was 20 years old. The paint had faded and one of the mirrors was cracked. The neighbors sometimes offered to help me replace it, but I always said no. They thought I was poor. I let them think that. It was easier this way. When people believe you don't have much, they stop paying attention. They look at you with pity, not suspicion. They speak kindly, but not carefully. And that's when they tell you who they really are. After breakfast, I sat by the window and looked through an old album. The pictures were yellowed with time. My husband Charles, smiling beside me, his arm around my shoulder. Our kids when they were small. Birthdays, Christmas mornings, the old car we used to take on trips. That book was the only thing that still made this house feel alive. I touched one of the photos, and for a moment I wished he was still here. He would have known what to say. I heard a car pull up outside. I didn't even need to look. I knew that sound, the engine of Nathan's black SUV. I closed the album and put it back on the table. I took a breath, fixed my sweater, and put my glasses on. The doorbell rang. Twice. Sharp and quick. When I opened the door, Nathan was standing there with his wife, Sienna. She was holding a small box. She smiled wide, too wide, and said, "Hi, Mom, we brought you something sweet." Her tone was soft, but her eyes were already scanning the room behind me. She always did that, looking around, pretending to admire, but really checking. Nathan didn't meet my eyes at first. He walked in, said, "How's the hand?" Like he had forgotten what happened. I said it was fine. He nodded and looked away. Sienna placed the box on the table. "It's apple pie, your favorite," she said. Her voice was sweet like honey, the kind that sticks to everything. "Thank you," I said. "That's kind of you." We sat down in the living room. Nathan started talking about his job, his coworkers, how stressful things had been. Sienna laughed at all the right places. I listened, smiled, nodded. I even asked questions when needed. But in my head, I was recording everything, every word, every glance. It was a habit from a lifetime ago. Most people forgot that before I retired, I used to work as a psychologist. Listening was part of my job. Remembering details, tone, the way people changed their breathing when they lied, those things never leave you. Nathan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Mom, you've been living alone too long. We worry about you," he said. Sienna added quickly, "We've been talking, and we think maybe it's time to make things easier for you. You know, financially." I tilted my head slightly. "Financially?" She smiled as if she'd just said something nice. "Yes. Maybe it's time to simplify your accounts. You don't want to be dealing with paperwork as you get older. It's stressful." I nodded, pretending to agree. "You're right. It can be stressful." Nathan relaxed a bit, thinking I was opening up. "Exactly. That's why we want to help. We can make sure your savings are safe. Maybe move some things into one place. We could even update your will together, make it clearer." "Of course," Sienna added quickly. "We'd never make any big changes without you knowing. We just want to take the pressure off you." They smiled together like they had rehearsed the whole thing. Inside, I felt a cold calm spread through me. I had heard this tone before, not from family, but from patients years ago. The way people talk when they want something but don't want to look greedy. I let them talk. I kept my face soft, my voice quiet. "That's very thoughtful of you," I said. Nathan nodded eagerly. "We're just trying to make sure everything is organized. You know how confusing money stuff can get." I smiled. "Oh, I know." He didn't notice how long I looked at him before saying that. He didn't see that I was watching every small movement, the tapping of his fingers, the way his eyes moved toward the bookshelf where I kept the small safe behind the photo frames. They thought I didn't see any of it. But I saw everything. After a while, I stood up and said I'd make coffee. In the kitchen, I took my time. I could hear them whispering in the living room. Their voices were low, but I caught pieces of it. Words like transfer, timing, and if she agrees. I poured the coffee, added milk, brought it back in. Sienna smiled again, but her eyes had that look, the one people get when they think they're already winning. We drank coffee and ate a small piece of pie together. Nathan told me about the new car dealership opening near his work. Sienna talked about a vacation she wanted to take next summer. I listened, smiled, said, "How nice that sounded." When they finally stood up to leave, Sienna hugged me gently, too gently. Nathan patted my shoulder and said, "We'll check on you again soon, Mom." I nodded. "Of course." I stood at the window and watched their car pull out of the driveway. When the taillights disappeared, I sat back down at the table. The half-eaten pie was still there. I wrapped it up and put it in the fridge. Then I sat quietly for a few minutes. I thought about how easy it was for them to lie to my face. How easily they turned concern into a tool. They thought I didn't know what they were doing. They thought I was weak, confused, ready to hand over everything just to feel safe. I looked down at my bandaged hands, still sore, still healing. Then I looked at the closed window where their reflection had been only minutes ago. "They think I'm weak," I whispered to myself. "But I think they've just dug their own grave." It was a quiet Thursday afternoon when they came back. The sky was clear for once, and the light coming through the window felt almost too bright. I was sitting at the kitchen table reading the paper with my glasses halfway down my nose when I heard the sound of their car. Nathan didn't even wait for me to answer the door this time. He just walked in with Sienna right behind him. He was smiling too wide, the kind of smile that comes before a sales pitch. "Mom, we found it," he said, holding up a folder thick with papers and photos. "The perfect house." Sienna smiled, brushing her hair off her shoulder like she was about to present a commercial. "You're going to love this, Beatrice. It's everything we've dreamed of. 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a big yard, and there's even a room downstairs. Perfect for you when you move in with us." She said it softly, like it was a kindness, but something in her tone made my stomach tighten. I took the folder from Nathan's hand and opened it. The photos were beautiful, I'll give them that. Bright rooms, wide windows, white walls that reflected light in every direction. The kind of house that looked open and clean, but to me it looked cold. Too exposed. The kind of place where you could never hide a thing. Nathan leaned over me, tapping the pictures with his finger. "Look, Mom, It's in a gated community, quiet, safe, good schools nearby. It's the kind of place where we could all be together again. You'd have your own room, your own bathroom. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing. Sienna added quickly, and we'd finally get to take care of you properly. You'd have family around, people who love you. Her hand rested on my shoulder as she said it. It was supposed to feel comforting, but it didn't. Her grip was just a little too firm, her smile just a little too practiced. I turned a page in the folder. Every picture was perfect, not a single flaw, but all I could think about was how the sunlight hit those giant windows. The house was made of glass. You could see straight through it from the front to the back. It wasn't a home. It was a stage. Nathan sat across from me. His voice was calm, but there was something in it, a pressure, a tone that reminded me of the night he broke my finger. Mom, you just have to sign a few papers to get this started. The bank already approved most of it. We just need your signature as a co-signer and everything will move fast. I looked at him over my glasses. And what does that mean exactly? He gave a short laugh. It just means your name helps us qualify. You don't have to pay anything. You won't even notice it. I nodded slowly, pretending to process it like an old woman who doesn't understand financial terms. And if something goes wrong? If you can't pay? Nathan waved his hand. That won't happen. I've got it all under control. My job is stable, Sienna's working, and the loan officer said it's a great deal. You have nothing to worry about. Sienna jumped in, her voice smooth and soft. Besides, Beatrice, if something did happen, and it won't, you'd come live with us. You'd never be alone again. Isn't that what you've always wanted? I looked down at my hands, acting like I was touched. I even let my voice shake a little when I said, Oh, I don't know, dear. That sounds like a big responsibility. What if I can't keep up? Sienna squeezed my shoulder again. Don't worry about anything. We'll take care of it all. Her words came out sweet, but they didn't match the cold in her eyes. For a few moments I stayed quiet, pretending to look through the photos again. In truth, I wasn't looking at the house anymore. I was looking at them. The way Nathan's eyes darted toward the papers on the table. The way Sienna smiled only when she thought I wasn't watching. Every small movement told me more than their words ever could. Nathan leaned forward again. Mom, this house isn't just for us. It's for you, too. Think about it. Your own space. No more worrying about bills or repairs. You've worked hard your whole life. Let us take care of things now. I gave a small nod. That's very kind of you. Inside, my thoughts were running fast. They'd rehearsed this, probably practiced it in the car before coming in. They had the same lines, the same rhythm. Nathan playing the responsible son. Sienna playing the gentle, caring daughter-in-law, but their eyes gave them away. When people lie, they always forget their eyes. I turned to the last page in the folder. There was a big, glossy photo of the front of the house, all white walls and glass panels. A reflection of the sun covered half of it like a warning. Nathan pointed to it. Can't you see yourself there, Mom? You'd finally have peace. A place for all of us. A new start. I met his eyes and said softly, A new start. He nodded quickly, smiling. Exactly. That's all we need. Just your signature, and we'll take care of everything else. The way he said just your signature made it sound like nothing. But I knew better. I always read every paper I ever signed. I knew what co-signing meant. I knew exactly what it meant to be responsible for someone else's debt. I looked up at him, tilting my head slightly, and asked again, as if confused, And if something happens? He hesitated, but Sienna jumped in before he could answer. Oh, Beatrice, don't think like that. Nothing bad will happen. We're being smart. It's a safe investment. Safe? That word again. I had heard it too many times in my life from people who wanted something. I smiled gently. Of course. You two have thought of everything. Nathan relaxed, thinking he'd won me over. He even reached out and touched my arm lightly. Mom, we're doing this for all of us. You'll thank us. One day. I nodded again, still smiling. I'm sure I will. They stayed for another 20 minutes talking about plans for the house, which colors to paint the rooms, where they'd put the garden, how they'd decorate my room with flowers and soft lights. They painted a perfect picture of a future that didn't exist. When they finally left, I walked them to the door. Sienna kissed my cheek. Nathan said he'd bring the papers next week. I waved as they drove away, then closed the door slowly. The house went quiet again. The folder was still on the table. I opened it one more time and stared at the photo on the last page. That big, bright house. Glass walls everywhere, nothing hidden, every corner exposed. They thought I would move into that house and live under their watch, surrounded by glass, stripped of the privacy, waiting for whatever came next. But they didn't realize what I saw when I looked at that photo. I didn't see a dream home. I saw a trap. I touched the broken finger that had almost healed, and I whispered to myself, "They think I can't see, but I've never seen them more clearly than I do now." That night, I sat alone in the kitchen long after the lights went out. The folder with the house photos was still on the table. I stared at it until the images stopped meaning anything. The smile on Nathan's face, Sienna's hand on my shoulder, the words, "Just sign here." I had spent most of my life solving other people's problems, as a wife, as a mother, as a psychologist. Now, it was time to solve my own. I reached for the phone and scrolled through the names I hadn't called in years. There she was, Dr. Evelyn Crane. We met when I was still working at the clinic. Back then, she was a rising lawyer with a sharp mind and no patience for excuses. Over the years, she built a reputation for taking down con artists who targeted the elderly. We hadn't spoken since Charles's funeral, but I knew she would answer. It took only 2 rings. "Beatrice Langford," she said, her voice the same as I remembered, clear, steady, without warmth but full of presence. "I was wondering when you'd call me." "I need help," I said simply. There was a pause. Then her tone changed slightly. "Tell me what he did." I told her everything. The broken finger, the pressure, the loan, the house. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. She listened without interrupting, only breathing on the other end of the line. When I finished, she said, "If you want sympathy, call a friend. If you want justice, I'll help. But understand this, Bae. Once we start, you're not a victim anymore. You're the hunter. Are you ready for that?" "Yes," I said. "I've been ready since the night he hurt me." "Good," she said. "Then let's hunt." The next morning she called back. "You'll need someone who can move quietly," she said. "I know a man, Jonas Pike, retired police detective. Does private work now. Discreet, expensive, but worth every cent. He'll find out what they're really planning." 2 days later, Jonas showed up at my door. He was tall, maybe in his late 50s, with the kind of face that had seen too many lies. His handshake was firm, his eyes calm but always scanning, as if he never stopped assessing a room. "Mrs. Langford," he said, taking off his hat. "Evelyn told me you're in a bad situation. Mind if I take a look around?" "Go ahead," I said. He noticed the photos on the table, the bandage still on my hand. "That your boy did this?" he asked quietly. "Yes." He nodded once. "Then let's make sure he doesn't get another chance." Jonas moved fast. Within 24 hours, he already had a lead. He followed Nathan and Sienna to a coffee shop on the east side, where they met with a man in a cheap suit, a realtor. Jonas took photos from his car. Later, he followed them to a notary office, then to the same property they had shown me in the folder. But something didn't add up. That evening, he called me. "Mrs. Langford, I've checked the property. Records," he said. "The house your son claims is $250,000. It's listed at $180. I stayed silent for a moment, letting the number sink in. "That's a $70,000 difference," he continued. "My guess is they're pocketing the gap. The deal they're setting up with the seller and a crooked lawyer, it's a common trick. They inflate the sale price on paper, get the bank to approve a higher loan, then split the difference. If you co-sign, they're covered. When they stop paying, the debt falls on you." He paused, then added, "They've also been talking to a bankruptcy attorney. Looks like they're planning to file after the purchase. Clean their names, leave you holding the bag." I leaned back in my chair, listening to the rain outside. My heart didn't race, my hands didn't shake. It was like I'd already known, deep down. "Do you have proof?" I asked. "I'll have it by tomorrow," he said. "Signed drafts, call logs, text messages. Once Evelyn gets this, she can bury them legally." "Good," I said. For a moment, there was only silence between us. Then Jonas asked softly, "You doing okay, ma'am?" Most people would be breaking down right about now. "I did that already," I said, "the night he broke my finger." He didn't answer, but I could tell he understood. That night, I didn't sleep much. I sat by the window again, the same spot I had sat when Nathan left the first time. The air smelled of rain and cold soil. Across the street, a neighbor's porch light flickered. Evelyn called around midnight. "Jonas just sent me the first set of files," she said. "It's worse than we thought. They're planning everything. Fake signatures, fraudulent claims, a full bankruptcy filing. This isn't just greed, Bea. It's a crime." "I know," I said. Her voice softened slightly. "Then what do you want to do next?" "I want to end it," I said. "But not yet. I want them to think they've won first." There was a pause. Then I heard her low laugh, the sound of someone who understood exactly what I meant. "You've always been patient," she said. "That's your weapon. Let them build the stage. You'll decide when the curtain falls." After she hung up, I stood in the quiet kitchen for a long time. The house was still, only the clock ticking on the wall. I looked at the folder again, at the glossy photo of that glass house. For the first time, it didn't make me angry. It made me focused. Everything was clear now. Who they were, what they wanted, how far they would go. I whispered to myself, when you know your enemy, you don't need fear. You only need patience. And patience was something I had in abundance. I started practicing how to sound weak. It wasn't hard. Age already gave me the tools. I just had to exaggerate them. The slight tremor in my hands, the slower walk, the long pauses before finishing a thought. Each morning I stood in front of the mirror and trained myself. I'd say sentences I already knew by heart. "I'm sorry, what were we talking about again?" Or, "Oh, my memory isn't what it used to be." I practiced letting my voice trail off mid-sentence, practiced losing my train of thought, even practiced the empty look people associate with confusion. It felt strange at first, pretending to be something I wasn't. But then I remembered the look in Nathan's eyes when he broke my finger, the way he looked through me, not at me. If he wanted to believe I was helpless, I would give him the performance of his life. Jonas came by one morning to check the brooch Evelyn had given me. It was small, a golden sparrow, a gift from my husband years ago. Inside, he'd hidden a microphone smaller than a grain of rice. It would record everything that happened in my living room and send it directly to Evelyn's encrypted drive. "This little bird will catch every word," Jonas said, testing the signal on his phone. I smiled. "A sparrow," I said quietly. "Charles used to say it meant freedom." "Then it's the perfect symbol," he said. Later that afternoon, I sat down at my desk and opened my old notebook, the one where I used to take therapy notes. I made a list of everything I needed to do before the next visit. Rehearse confusion, leave unpaid bills on the counter, put expired medicine bottles by the sink, talk about my will. If they wanted to prove I was slipping, I would make it easy for them. The following weekend, Nathan and Sienna came again. I knew they would. They always came when they thought I was alone long enough to be pliable. Nathan entered first, carrying a folder under his arm. Sienna followed, smiling too brightly, wearing a cream coat and a scent that filled the whole room. "Mom," Nathan said, "how are you feeling today? You look tired." I gave a small laugh. "Oh, probably just age catching up with me." I let my voice shake just enough. "Sometimes I forget where I put things." Sienna glanced at Nathan, just a flicker of movement, but I caught it. The quick flash in her eyes aimed satisfaction. They were testing me already. Sienna leaned closer. "Beatrice, have you been taking your pills? You know, for your blood pressure?" "Oh, I think so," I said softly. "I can't remember if I took them this morning." She smiled, that same fake kindness she used every time she spoke to me. "That's all right, it happens. Maybe we should help you organize your medications better." Nathan nodded. "Yeah, maybe we could get you one of those weekly boxes so you don't forget." I smiled faintly. That would be nice. Inside, I was counting every second, every glance they exchanged, every note they mentally recorded. They weren't visiting to help, they were gathering evidence. Evelyn had warned me this would happen. "They'll try to prove diminished capacity," she'd said. "They want the world to think you're losing your mind so they can control your assets. Make them believe it. But do it on your terms." So I did. I forgot my phone on the couch. I confused the days. I asked Nathan twice what month it was. Each small mistake was a breadcrumb, leading them exactly where I wanted. Sienna's tone grew bolder as the visit went on. She began speaking slower like one does with children. "You know, Beatrice, maybe it's time to think about simplifying things. It must be hard keeping track of bills and papers. Nathan could help you with that." I gave her the look of a grateful, lost woman. Oh, you're both so good to me. I don't know what I'd do without you. Nathan smiled, trying to hide his triumph. That's what family's for, Mom. When they left the room to fetch coffee, I sat still in my chair. The sparrow brooch on my chest was recording every word. Jonas had been right. It was sharp and sensitive. Every whisper, every fake tone of concern would be captured perfectly. Through the thin walls, I could hear them talking in the kitchen. Sienna's voice came first, low but excited. You see? She's slipping. She forgot the day again. It's time we start documenting this. Maybe get a note from a doctor. Nathan murmured, We'll need it for the paperwork later. If anyone asks, we'll show she wasn't thinking clearly when she signed. That'll protect us. Sienna replied, almost whispering, We have to move fast. Once the house is approved, she signs, and we're done. There was a long pause. Then Nathan said something that made my stomach turn cold. If she resists again, I'll handle it. She'll sign. The cup in my hand trembled slightly, but I didn't let it drop. I just stared at the window, at the reflection of the two of them moving in the kitchen like shadows in someone else's life. When they came back, I smiled. I was just thinking, I said softly, maybe I should write my will again. You know, just to make things clear. Sienna's eyes lit up instantly. She tried to hide it with a sympathetic smile, but she couldn't. Oh, Beatrice, that's very wise of you, she said. It's important to have everything in order. Nathan nodded quickly. Yeah, we can help with that. I can call a lawyer for you. That would be nice, I said. But let's not rush. I want to think carefully. Oh, of course, Sienna said, still smiling, but her eyes, those cold, analytical eyes, gave her away. She wasn't smiling at me. She was studying me. Like a doctor observing a patient's final stages of decline. She believed every second of my performance. After they left, I stayed sitting in that same chair, listening to the quiet ticking of the clock. My hand was still shaking slightly, but not from fear, from the effort of holding it still during the act. Jonas arrived later to collect the recording. He listened to a few seconds on his laptop, then looked up at me. You've got them. This is good, solid evidence. The way they talk, the way they plan. It's all in there. I nodded. Good. He smiled faintly. You're a better actress than half the people I've arrested. I've had time to study people, I said, and I know exactly what they expect from me. Evelyn called that night after reviewing the file. Bae, you're doing beautifully, she said. They believe every word. Keep playing the part. When they think they've broken you completely, that's when we move. I understand, I said. Are you all right? She asked quietly. Yes, I replied. It's strange. The more I act like I'm losing myself, the clearer I feel. Later that night, I stood in front of the mirror again. I looked at my reflection, the gray sweater, the tired face, the small tremor in my hand. I whispered to the woman staring back at me. If they want me weak, I'll be weak, until they believe I've already died inside. Then I smiled because I knew something they didn't. The dead can't be broken. It was past midnight when I heard the crying. At first, I thought it was the wind. The sound came soft and uneven, carried through the thin walls between my house and Ruth Gardner's. Ruth had lived next door for almost 20 years. We weren't close friends, but we had the kind of neighborly bond that grows slowly. Morning greetings, borrowed sugar, a wave when we took out the trash. Her husband had died 2 years before mine, and after that she kept mostly to herself. The crying didn't stop. I sat up in bed and listened. It was the sound of someone trying to cry quietly and failing. I pulled on my robe and slippers, wrapped my shawl around my shoulders, and stepped outside. The night was cold, the grass damp with dew. I knocked softly on her door. After a moment, the door opened. Ruth stood there in her nightgown, her eyes red and swollen. "Oh, Bee," she whispered. "I didn't mean to wake anyone." "You didn't," I said gently. "I couldn't sleep." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in." Her house looked smaller than I remembered. Boxes were stacked near the door, some half-taped, some labeled in shaky handwriting. On the table sat a pile of papers, neatly arranged but clearly untouched. I looked at them, then back at her. "Moving?" She nodded weakly. "They want me to. My daughter says it's for my own good." Her voice cracked on the last words. We sat down at the table. The kitchen smelled faintly of lavender and something burnt, Maybe tea left too long on the stove. Ruth poured 2 cups, her hands trembling. She says I can't live alone anymore, she said. That I'll be better in a care home, safer. And do you believe her? I asked. She looked at me with that same helplessness I used to see in my therapy patients, the look of someone torn between guilt and fear. She says she's doing it because she loves me. I took a slow sip of tea before answering. No one hurts us out of love, Ruth. Love doesn't take away our homes. She stared into her cup. The tears came again, quiet but steady. I told her I wasn't ready, but she said the house is too much for me. That selling it now would give us both peace. And what happens to you after it's sold? I asked softly. Her shoulders shook. She said I'd have my own room at the facility, that it's nice there. They have bingo nights. She tried to smile but couldn't. Bae, I don't want bingo. I want my kitchen, my garden, my life. I reached across the table and took her hand. It was cold, thin, fragile, like holding a bird afraid to fly. Then don't let them take it. She looked at me as if I just said something impossible. But she's my daughter. What can I do? The words hit me harder than I expected. I saw myself reflected in her face. The same confusion, the same desperate loyalty that kept women like us trapped between love and fear. For a moment, I didn't see Ruth. I saw myself. If I did nothing, if I kept pretending, that would be my future. My son, my own flesh and blood, would take everything I had left and call it love. Ruth broke the silence. Do you ever wonder what happens to us, Bea? We raise them, we give them everything, and then one day, they decide we're the problem to fix. I nodded. Yes, and they call it care. She laughed bitterly, then covered her face. I'm so ashamed. I thought she loved me. You don't have to be ashamed, I said softly. It's what they count on, our shame, our silence. They use it to make us small. Her tears slowed. She wiped her eyes and looked at me, searching for something. You're not like me, she said quietly. You're strong. You still have fight in you. I smiled faintly. Maybe, but that fight comes from fear, too. She frowned. Fear of what? Of becoming you, I said gently. For a long time she didn't speak. Then she nodded slowly. Then don't. Whatever you're facing, don't let them win. I squeezed her hand. I don't plan to. When I got home, the house felt colder than before. The clock on the wall read 2:17 a.m. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat by the window and looked out at Ruth's porch, where a single lamp still glowed. Somewhere deep inside, I heard my mother's voice, the one that still lived in fragments of memory. She used to say, family is a velvet knife, soft to the touch, but it still cuts. That night, those words finally made sense. I thought of Ruth's face, her tears, her trembling hands. I thought of the way she said they loved me as if it were an excuse for being hurt. And I thought of myself sitting in the same quiet darkness, waiting for the same knife to fall, but I wasn't going to let it. Not this time. I went to my desk and opened a new notebook. On the first page, I wrote one sentence. We will survive. The words looked strange in my handwriting, small, uneven, but alive. I underlined them twice. Outside, Ruth's light went out. The neighborhood fell silent. I closed my notebook, put it beside the sparrow brooch, and whispered to the dark, We will, Ruth. We'll survive. We met at Evelyn's office late one afternoon. The blinds were half closed, the kind of light that makes everything look gray and serious. On her desk were folders, a laptop, and a small recorder. Jonas sat beside me, flipping through his notes. Evelyn didn't waste time. They're close, she said. The paperwork's nearly ready. You said they're planning to bring it this weekend? Yes, I answered. Nathan called this morning. He said he wants to finalize everything before the month ends. Jonas leaned forward. That means they're confident. Good. Confidence makes people talk too much. Evelyn nodded. We'll use that. The goal is simple. Get them to admit their plan in your house, on camera and on audio. Once we have their words, I'll handle the rest. Jonas opened a small black case. Inside were pieces of equipment that looked like they belonged in a spy movie. Small cameras, wire cables, tiny microphones. We'll put one camera in the clock, another near the bookshelf. The audio feed from the sparrow brooch still works. Just remember, act natural. I smiled faintly. Acting is the easy part. He looked at me carefully. Mrs. Langford, this isn't just acting. They'll be watching you for weakness. You can't look strong, not even for a second. If they sense you're faking it, they'll shut down. I understand, I said. I'll give them what they want. Evelyn leaned back in her chair. When they bring the papers, stall them. Ask questions. Let them feel in control. The more relaxed they are, the more careless they'll become. Jonas added, and when they think they've won, that's when they'll say something real. People always do. I nodded slowly. Then that's when I'll stop pretending to forget. They both looked at me. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Evelyn smiled slightly. That small, proud smile she gave only when she saw someone take back their power. The next day, Jonas came to my house to install everything. He worked quietly, moving from room to room, checking angles, hiding lenses behind picture frames and inside the wall clock. The equipment was so small that even I had trouble finding it once he was done. When he finished, he stood by the door and said, "Everything's live. Evelyn will be monitoring the feed. You just focus on playing your part." I nodded. "I will." Before he left, he hesitated. "You sure you're ready for this?" I looked at him. "I've been ready since the day they called me weak." He smiled once, then tipped his hat and left. That night, I rehearsed my lines. I stood in front of the mirror, holding a copy of the fake documents Evelyn had prepared for practice. "Remind me again, dear, what's this for?" I said softly, pretending to squint. Then, "I don't remember signing anything last week." Then, "Oh, my memory's not what it used to be. I changed. My tone each time, searching for the perfect mix of fragility and confusion. It had to sound real, not exaggerated, not forced. The kind of forgetfulness that made people lower their guard. After a while, I stopped practicing words and focused on my face. The reflection staring back at me didn't look the same anymore. The wrinkles that once bothered me now looked like something else, like lines drawn by time itself, each one earned. They weren't marks of age anymore. They were trenches, quiet reminders of every fight I'd survived. I leaned closer to the mirror and whispered, "Let them think I'm fragile. That's how I win." Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the faint sound of chimes from the neighbor's porch. The same soft tune Ruth used to play when she watered her plants. I thought of her again, of her empty house, of her last words, "Don't let them win." I looked down at the sparrow brooch pinned to my sweater. The tiny camera light blinked once, waiting. Everything was ready. The microphones were tested. The cameras were hidden. Evelyn was on standby. Jonas was nearby, parked down the street with a live feed. All that was left now was the performance. I sat on the couch, folded my hands, and stared at the clock. The house was silent except for its slow, steady ticking. I could almost hear Nathan's voice in my head, rehearsing his lines too. "Mom, just sign. It's for your own good." This time I smiled. The light outside was fading when I finally stood up. I went to the hallway mirror again, adjusted my hair, straightened my sweater, and looked myself in the eye. "This is it," I whispered, the final act. The woman in the mirror didn't look afraid. She looked calm, patient, ready. I checked the clock one more time. The second hand moved past 12. "Time to try the biggest role of my life," I said quietly. Then I sat back down and waited for the knock on the door. Saturday morning arrived bright and cold. The air outside was still, the kind of silence that comes before something important. I had been awake since dawn, making tea, setting the table, straightening the papers Jonas had placed the night before. At exactly 9:30, their car pulled into the driveway. The sound of the engine was sharp in the quiet neighborhood. I stood by the window and watched them for a moment before opening the door. Nathan walked in first, smiling like a man who already owned everything in sight. Sienna followed, carrying a small leather folder. Her perfume filled the room, sweet, heavy, and fake like her kindness. "Morning, Mom," Nathan said cheerfully. "Ready to make this official?" I smiled faintly. "Official?" He lifted the folder slightly. "The loan papers, 3 signatures, that's all. After this, the house is ours." "Ours?" The word stung, but I didn't show it. I motioned for them to sit. The morning light came through the window, thin and pale, scattering dust across the room. The air was heavy with that strange mix of sunlight and tension, the kind that makes every sound sharper. Even the creak of the chair seemed loud. I sat at the table across from them. The folder sat between us like a weapon. Sienna opened it and began laying out the pages carefully, aligning the corners, her movements slow and deliberate. She smiled at me. "Just 3 signatures, Beatrice. We've already filled in the rest. You just need to confirm." Nathan added quickly, "Then we'll go celebrate. That Italian place you like, remember? They still have your favorite soup." I let out a small laugh. "That sounds nice." Inside, I could feel my heartbeat, steady but strong. The sparrow brooch was pinned neatly on my sweater, blinking once every few seconds. Evelyn was watching. Jonas was nearby. Everything was live. Nathan slid the first paper toward me. "Here, Mom. Start here." I leaned forward, squinting a little. "Oh, my glasses," I murmured. "Can you get them for me from the counter?" Sienna reached for them, her patience clearly thinning. "Of course." While she turned, I took my phone from under the table, typed one word, "activate," and pressed send. A faint vibration followed, confirmation that the signal was live. The room was now a quiet stage, every movement caught, every word preserved. I put on my glasses and picked up the pen. My hand trembled, not from nerves, but from practice. I had learned how to make the tremor look natural. Nathan leaned closer. "Don't overthink it, Mom. It's all standard stuff. You're helping us get approved, that's all." I nodded slowly, pretending to read. The sound of the paper as I turned it over was loud in the silence. A soft, dry crackle, like a knife dragged across fabric. Sienna's voice came smooth and patient. "Beatrice, we know it's a lot to take in, but we've got everything covered. You don't have to worry about a thing." I smiled faintly, keeping my eyes on the page. "I trust you, dear." She beamed, mistaking pity for weakness. "That's sweet of you." I lifted the pen and wrote my name slowly. Beatrice Langford. Shaky, uncertain, deliberate. The ink spread slightly at the end, just enough to look unsteady. "One down," Nathan said, his voice light. He moved another sheet in front of me. "Just 2 more, and you can relax." I signed again. Another slow movement, another small tremor. My breath stayed calm, my mind sharp. When the 3rd page came, I paused. The pen hovered just above the line. Nathan noticed. "What's wrong?" "Oh, nothing," I said softly. "I was just wondering something." He shifted impatiently. "About what?" I looked up at both of them. "If something happened, if you couldn't pay, who would the house belong to then?" For the first time that morning, Sienna hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward Nathan. Nathan didn't hesitate at all. "To you, Mom," he said quickly. "Then, eventually to us. That's how these things work." I nodded slowly. "To you, then to me." "I see." I lowered my eyes, pretending to think, and signed the final page. "Perfect," Sienna said brightly, gathering the papers before the ink even dried. "That wasn't so bad, was it?" I smiled. "No, not bad at all." They relaxed instantly. Nathan leaned back in his chair, relief flooding his voice. "Finally, it's done. You'll see, Mom, this will make things so much easier for all of us." Sienna stood and began tucking the papers into the folder. "Let's get going, Nathan. The bank closes early today." He nodded. "Right." They were already halfway to the door when I spoke again. "Nathan?" He turned, folder in hand. "Yeah, Mom?" I looked at him quietly. "Thank you for explaining everything so clearly. I just wanted to be sure I understood." He smiled, not realizing the trap he had already stepped into. "Of course. You know I wouldn't hide anything from you." "I know," I said softly. They left soon after, still talking, still celebrating. I stood at the window and watched them walk to the car, the folder clutched tightly in Sienna's hand like treasure. The sunlight reflected off the windshield and hit my eyes for a moment. It was blinding, sharp, but it didn't bother me. I just stood there listening. A minute later, my phone buzzed. One new message from Evelyn. Got it. Every word. Perfect. I sat down slowly at the table where the dust still floated through the light. The smell of paper and ink lingered in the air. I placed my hand flat on the wooden surface and whispered to the empty room. Sometimes, to make them tell the truth, all you have to do is stay quiet long enough. The clock ticked once. Then I smiled. Sunday morning came with a clean, cold light. I woke early, dressed in gray, and sat in silence for a long time before the car arrived. Nathan texted, "Leaving now?" Sienna's so excited. Excited, that word again. It still amazed me how people could feel joy on the edge of their own destruction. When they pulled into the driveway, I was already waiting outside. Nathan looked sharp in a suit, the kind he wore when he wanted to look responsible. Sienna had her hair tied high and her makeup perfect, but her eyes were restless. The smell of expensive perfume hit me again. It reminded me of people who always tried too hard to look clean. "Morning, Mom," Nathan said, opening the passenger door for me. "Ready for the big day?" "I suppose I am," I said softly, getting into the car. The drive was quiet at first. They talked about little things, furniture, colors for the living room, how they might throw a small dinner once the new house was officially theirs. I just looked out the window, watching the city wake up. When we reached the bank, the sky was overcast. The glass building reflected everything like a mirror, hard, cold, perfect. We stepped through the front doors. Inside, the air smelled of polish and quiet power. Behind the main counter stood a tall man in his 50s with silver hair and calm eyes. Leonard Price. I had met him once before, years ago, at one of Evelyn's dinner parties. Now he wore a suit so crisp it looked like it could cut paper. He greeted us warmly. "Mrs. Langford? Nathan, Ms. Vale. Please come in. Let's take care of your business." We followed him to a private office. The door closed behind us with a soft click. Leonard motioned to the chairs. "Please sit." Sienna sat first, crossing her legs neatly. Nathan placed the folder on the table like a trophy. He was nervous but trying to hide it. Leonard opened his laptop, typed something, and turned the screen slightly toward me. "Before we proceed, Mrs. Langford, I just need to confirm your financial background for the co-signing process." Nathan waved a hand dismissively. "That's not necessary. My mother's retired. She has one account, just her pension. We already went through this." Leonard looked at him with polite patience. "It's standard procedure, sir. Every co-signer must be verified." I nodded quietly. "It's fine, dear. I don't have much anyway." Leonard smiled. "Let's see then." He typed again. The computer beeped softly, and then a window appeared on the screen. I saw it first. Long columns of numbers, then a total at the bottom. $250,000. The room went still. Nathan's face lost its color. He blinked, leaned forward, and stared as if his eyes refused to understand. Sienna's hand froze on her purse. Mom, Nathan stammered. "What is this? What are we looking at?" Leonard's voice was calm. "These are Mrs. Langford's verified accounts across 3 institutions. Combined value, $2,950,000. Nathan turned to me, disbelief twisting his face. "You told me you barely had enough to live on." I looked at him evenly. I said that because I wanted to know who would still love me when I had nothing. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Sienna sat perfectly still, her lipstick now too bright against her pale skin. Leonard cleared his throat and pulled out a file. "There's more. Mrs. Langford's lawyer requested a review of your loan documents. During that process, we discovered several irregularities." Nathan's head snapped up. "Irregularities?" "Yes," Leonard said, his tone firm now. "False property valuation, undisclosed commission, manipulated signatures. In short, fraud." Sienna gasped. "That's ridiculous." Leonard didn't even look at her. He slid a printed sheet across the table. "This is a record of the real purchase price for the property. $180,000. You applied for $250,000. Nathan's voice cracked. It's a mistake." Leonard's expression didn't change. "No, Mr. Harland, it's a crime. This document also shows your intention to declare bankruptcy after the funds were transferred. Would you like to deny that?" Nathan's lips trembled. "How would you even know that?" Leonard looked at me. "Your mother's legal team provided the evidence yesterday evening." Silence. For a long moment, nobody moved. The air was heavy, thick. You could hear the faint ticking of Leonard's desk clock, the same sound as the one at home. Nathan finally whispered, "Mom, what did you do?" I met his eyes and spoke quietly. "When you broke my finger, you didn't just break a bone, Nathan. You broke the last piece of me that believed you were still my son." He looked down, as if the words themselves had weight. Sienna leaned forward, suddenly desperate. "Beatrice, you don't have to do this. We can fix it. We can—" Leonard interrupted sharply. "It's out of your hands now, Ms. Vale. The loan application has been flagged. The police are on their way. Nathan's voice rose. Police? For what? She's my mother. This is family business. Leonard closed the laptop gently. No, Mr. Harland. This is financial abuse against a senior citizen. It's a criminal matter. The door opened quietly. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside. Their presence was calm, professional, final. I didn't move. I just watched as they approached. Nathan stood, his chair scraping against the floor. You can't do this. Mom, say something. Tell them this is a misunderstanding. I looked at him and felt an ache that was half sadness, half relief. It stopped being a misunderstanding the moment you tried to sell my name for your comfort. Sienna whispered, almost to herself, This isn't happening. One officer read them their rights. The other reached for the folder still on the table. Nathan's voice cracked again. Mom, please. We're family. I shook my head. Family doesn't use love as a weapon. As they were led toward the door, Nathan turned one last time. You planned this, he said bitterly. All of it. Yes, I answered simply. And you gave me every reason to. He looked at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. Maybe he didn't. When the door closed, the room was suddenly too quiet. Leonard sat down slowly, exhaled, and said, It's over. But I knew it wasn't really over. Not for me. Not yet. He turned his computer back toward me. The screensaver came up, soft blue light filling the glass walls. It reflected on my face, half bright, half shadow. Leonard said gently, Justice has a price, Mrs. Langford. Are you ready for it? I looked at him and nodded. I've already paid. He gave a small nod of respect. Then you've won. Outside, I could see the flashing lights of the police cars. The reflection flickered across the office walls, red and blue merging into violet. For a long moment, I just sat there, hands folded, listening to the distant sound of a door closing somewhere down the hall. When I finally stood, I looked once more at the glass, at my own reflection caught between light and dark. Justice, I thought, never comes clean. It always leaves a mark. The sound of the cuffs was louder than I expected. A sharp click, then another. 2 short metallic notes that ended years of silence. Nathan struggled when the officers took his wrists. You can't do this, he shouted, his voice cracking. She's my mother. One officer spoke calmly. Sir, you have the right to remain silent. I'm not going anywhere. Nathan pulled, twisted, but the more he fought, the smaller he looked. Sienna grabbed his arm, crying, Stop, Nathan, please. Her voice broke. You're making it worse. I sat still. I didn't move, didn't speak. My tea was getting cold on the table, a thin curl of steam fading into the air. I watched the whole thing the way one watches rain through a window. Distant, inevitable. Sienna turned to me suddenly, her eyes wild. You did this, she screamed. You planned everything. You're insane. I met her eyes and said quietly, No, I'm just finally clear. She froze for a second, her mouth open, but no more words came. Nathan kept yelling, Mom, tell them. Tell them it's a mistake. You can't let this happen. I set down the teacup gently. It's not a mistake, Nathan. You made your choices. Now they're simply catching up. He stared at me like he didn't recognize the woman in front of him. You're not my mother, he said bitterly. My mother would never, I interrupted, calm and steady. Your mother used to hold you when you fell. She used to tell you everything could be fixed if you just tried to be better. But that mother doesn't exist anymore. You killed her the day you chose greed over love. His face broke. For a moment, just one brief second, I saw the boy he once was, the one who used to run barefoot in the yard, trip over his own feet and cry until I held him close. The memory flickered and vanished. Now that same boy stood in front of me in handcuffs. His eyes, once bright with trust, were empty. I felt something twist in my chest. Not pity, something quieter, sadder. A final letting go. The officers guided him toward the door. His voice softened. Mom, please. I didn't answer. Sienna followed behind, still shouting, her tears streaking through her makeup. You think this makes you strong? You're just a bitter old woman. You ruined your own family. I looked at her and said, No, dear. I saved what was left of it. She tried to lunge forward, but the officer held her back. Her voice turned into a hoarse cry. You'll die alone for this. I took a slow breath. Better alone than owned. The door shut behind them, cutting off the noise. Silence returned. A deep, complete silence. Only the faint hum of the air conditioner remained. Leonard stood by the desk, watching me. His expression softened. "Mrs. Langford," he said quietly, "I've seen hundreds of cases like this. None ended like yours. I truly admire you." I gave him a small nod. "Admiration isn't necessary, Mr. Price, just fairness." He hesitated. "Still, that kind of strength, it's rare." I smiled faintly. "It's not strength. It's survival." He didn't argue. Instead, he poured fresh tea into my cup, as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. The smell of chamomile filled the room again, warm and calm. For a moment, I watched the tiny circles of steam rise, breaking apart in the cold light. Then I whispered, mostly to myself, "A mother gives life with blood. But today, I gave myself life again with tears." Leonard looked at me, a quiet, steady look that didn't need words. I reached for the cup, lifted it slowly, and took a sip. The tea was bitter now, but I didn't mind. Some bitterness, I thought, is just the taste of truth finally revealed. Outside the glass wall, 2 police cars pulled away from the curb. Their lights flashed red and blue across the window, the same colors that once decorated birthday cakes and Christmas trees when Nathan was little. Funny how the same lights can mean celebration or punishment, depending on the choices we make. I kept watching until the cars disappeared from view. The reflections faded, leaving only my own face in the glass, tired, lined, but steady. Leonard broke the silence. "Would you like me to call Evelyn for you?" "Yes," I said softly. "Tell her the curtain's finally closed." He nodded and stepped outside, leaving me alone with my tea. The room was quiet again. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel heavy. I set the cup down, folded my hands, and looked out through the glass one last time. The world outside was still turning. Somewhere, people were laughing, buying groceries, living ordinary lives. And in that moment, I realized something simple but absolute. Justice doesn't give you peace. It just gives you space to breathe again. I closed my eyes, breathed in slowly, and whispered, "Finally." 6 months later, my house was quiet again. The newspapers had long stopped camping outside my door, but the name stayed, The Widow of Justice. I didn't choose it, but somehow it fit. People sent letters, some from women my age who said they wished they had done what I did, others from men who admitted they had failed to protect their parents. Every envelope was a story, every line a wound. I kept them all in a wooden box by the window. On slow mornings, I opened it and reread a few. They reminded me that what happened wasn't only about my family. It was about so many others who had been quiet for too long. Evelyn came often. She had that same sharp focus, but now she smiled more. Jonas, too, still serious, still careful, but with something softer in his eyes. The 3 of us had built something together. We called it the Langford Foundation for Elder Justice, a place for those who were ignored, manipulated, or left alone to fight systems they didn't understand. We rented a small office downtown. White walls, clean desks, sunlight through big windows. On the door, the name was printed in simple letters. No gold, no design, just truth. Ruth Gardner was the first volunteer. When she walked through the door that morning, her hands were shaking a little, but her smile was strong. She said, "If you hadn't come that night, I wouldn't be here today." I hugged her, really hugged her, not the polite kind. "Then let's make sure no one else ever feels that alone again," I told her. From that day, the foundation grew. We helped people write complaints, file cases, understand their rights. Evelyn trained young lawyers to handle elder abuse cases. Jonas led workshops on detecting financial scams. I spent my days listening, to voices that had been dismissed, to stories that mirrored my own pain in different forms. Every night before locking up, I turned off the lights one by one and looked at the reflection on the glass door. It wasn't the same woman I used to see. The grief was still there, but it had changed shape. It was now a kind of fuel. One afternoon, Evelyn told me there was going to be a national conference on elder rights. She said, "You should speak, Beatrice. People need to hear you." At first I said no. I wasn't used to microphones or crowds. But she insisted. "You've already spoken to the whole country once. This time they'll listen." So I agreed. The hall was large and full of light. Rows of faces wore gray hair, walking canes, soft wrinkles. But behind those faces was something unbroken. When they introduced me, there was a long pause before I walked to the podium. The sound of my shoes against the floor echoed in the room. I could feel every heartbeat. I looked at them, hundreds of eyes waiting, not for a speech, but for truth. I took a breath and began. Age isn't weakness, I said slowly. It's wisdom sharpened by pain. We've been told to stay quiet, to accept, to forgive without reason. But silence is the enemy of justice, and I've learned that no one is too old to fight for what's right. There was a moment of stillness. Then, one by one, people started to stand. An old man with a cane, a woman with white hair, then another, and another, until the whole hall was on its feet, clapping, crying, holding each other's hands. The sound filled the room, a wave of applause that seemed to last forever. I stepped back from the microphone and whispered to myself, I'm not afraid of growing old anymore. I'm only afraid of staying silent when evil speaks. The cameras flashed, the lights shimmered, but all I felt was peace. It wasn't triumph, it wasn't revenge. It was something simpler, the quiet satisfaction of finally turning pain into purpose. As the crowd kept clapping, I thought of Nathan. Somewhere he was still serving his sentence. Maybe one day he'd understand. Maybe not. Either way, I had already forgiven him, not for his sake, but for mine. When the event ended, Ruth came to my side and took my hand. You did it, she whispered. No, I said, smiling. We did. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and soft gray. I stood there for a long time, feeling the warmth on my face. For the first time in years, I wasn't acting anymore. The evening light fell softly over Meadow Lane. It was one of those late afternoons that carried both warmth and sadness, the kind of light that lingers just long enough to remind you how quickly days fade. I stood in my kitchen, pouring hot water into the teapot. The scent of chamomile rose with the steam. Outside the window, the trees swayed gently, their leaves glowing gold in the low sun. 6 months ago, this house had been a place of silence and fear. Now, it was simply home again. My plants had grown taller, my shelves were filled with new books, and the air carried the smell of life instead of tension. I had gotten used to the quiet, not the lonely kind, but the peaceful kind that comes after a long storm. Every sound felt clear, the ticking clock, the kettle settling on the counter, the faint hum of the radio. Then the phone rang. It was an old rotary phone, one I had kept out of habit. The ring was soft, but sharp enough to pull me back from my thoughts. I wiped my hands on a towel and answered. Langford Foundation, this is Beatrice speaking. There was a pause. Then a voice, fragile, trembling, scared. Mrs. Langford? I don't know if you can help me. My daughter, she wants me to sell my house. She says it's for my own good, but I don't feel right about it. I closed my eyes for a moment. The words echoed like something I had already lived. What's your name, dear? I asked gently. Marjorie, she said, her voice breaking. She says the house is too old, that I can't manage, but she's already talking to an agent. I don't know what to do. I smiled even though she couldn't see it. You did the right thing by calling. What should I do now? She whispered. I took a slow breath. The same calm I'd learned through every pain came back, steady and warm. First, I said softly, don't sign anything. There was silence on the other end, a kind of held breath, then a faint, shaky laugh. Don't sign. Yes, I suppose that's a start. Yes, I said, and tell me everything, from the beginning. I could hear her exhale, like the sound of a weight leaving her chest. Then her story began, hesitant, broken, but honest. I listened without interrupting, just as Evelyn had once done for me. Every word carried fear, but also hope. As she spoke, I looked out the window. The light had turned softer now, the sky a wash of orange fading into blue. Dust floated in the air, glowing like tiny sparks. It felt familiar, that quiet before another fight begins. When Marjorie finished, her voice steadied a little. You think there's something I can do? Yes, I said, and you won't have to do it alone. Thank you, she whispered. You sound like someone who understands. I do, I replied. More than you know? We said goodbye, and I hung up slowly, the receiver clicking into place. For a long time, I stood there, staring at the phone. Then I poured the tea into my cup and walked to the window. Outside, the last line of sunlight slipped through the branches, spilling across the table like a thin blanket of gold. Through the glass, the reflection showed a woman older than she remembered being, but her eyes were clear, alive. Somewhere behind me, the answering machine blinked. The Foundation phone never stayed quiet for long anymore. Every week brought a new story, another call for help. And I realized something. Some battles never really end. They just change names, change faces. I lifted the cup and took a slow sip. The warmth spread through me, steady and grounding. Outside, the camera of the world, if it had been there, would have pulled back slowly. Past the window, past the light spilling from my living room, past the little garden with its fading roses. The house stood small but steady in the mist, a single warm square of light in the growing dusk. And as the evening folded into night, my voice, calm, certain, would have carried softly over the scene. Some wars never end. But every time we win one, the world becomes a little less cold.